Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 5. Diagon Alley. Harry woke early the next morning. Although he could tell it was daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed a giant called Hagrid come to tell me I was going to school for wizards. When I open my eyes, I will be at home in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise. And there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking. But he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, tap, tap. All right, Harry murmured. I'm getting up. Harry sat up, and Hagrid's heavy coat fell off him. The hunt was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Hagrid himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rasping its claws on the window, a newspaper held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet, so happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the front floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that! Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on singeing the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl. Pay him, Hagrid grunted to the sofa. What? He wants paying for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's pockets seemed to be made of nothing but pockets, bunch of keys, slug parrots, bows of strings, mint handbags, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give him 5 knots, said Hagrid sleepily. Knots? The little round things. Harry counted out 5 little round coins, and the owl held out its leg so he could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then it flew off through the open window. Hagrid yawned loudly and sat up and stretched. Best be off, Harry. Last to do today. Gotta get up to London and buy your stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard's coin and looking at them. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid? Said Hagrid, who was pulling on his huge boots. I haven't got any money, and you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic. Don't worry about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head. Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything? But if their house was destroyed, they didn't keep their gold in the house, boy. Nah. First stop for us is Gringotts, Wizard's Bank. Have sausage, they're not bad cold, and I wouldn't say no to a bit of your birthday cake neither. Wizards have banks? Just the one, Gringotts, learned by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah, so you'd be mad to try to love it. I will tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe. Except maybe Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I gonna visit Gringotts anyway. For Dumbledore, Hogwarts business. Harry drew himself up proudly. He usually gets me to do important stuff for him. Fetching you, getting things from Gringotts. Knows he can trust me, see? Got everything? Come on then. Harry followed Hagrid out onto the rock. The sea was quite clear now, and the sea gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with lots of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Harry asked, looking around for another boat. Flew, said Hagrid. Flew? Yeah, but we will go back in this. Not supposed to use magic now I got you. They settled down in the boat, Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying. Seems a bit shame too low, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another sideways look. If I was to speed things a bit, would you not mind mentioning it at Hogwarts? Of course not, said Harry, eager to see more magic. Hagrid pulled out a pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off towards land. Why would you be mad to try and love Gringotts? Harry asked. Spells, enchantments, said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. They say there's dragon guarding the Gringotts in hundreds of miles under the London Sea, deep under the underground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out, even if you did manage to get your hands on the summit. Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read his newspaper, the Daily Prophet. Harry had learned from Uncle Vernon that people like to be left alone while they do this. But it was very difficult. He'd never had so many questions in his life. Minister of Magic messing things up as usual, Hagrid muttered, turning the page. There's a Ministry of Magic? Harry asked, before he could stop himself. Of course, said Hagrid. They wanted Dumbledore for Minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts, so old Cornelius got the job. Burglar if ever there was one. So he felt Dumbledore with an owl every morning asking for advice. But what does a Ministry of Magic do? Well, their main job is to keep it from the muggles that there steal witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why? Blimey, Harry. Everyone be wanting magic solutions to their problems. Nah, we're best left alone. At this moment, the boat bumped gently into the harbor wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper and they climbed up the stone steps onto the street. Passers-by stared out at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only Hagrid twice as tall as everyone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking metals and saying loudly, "See that, Harry? Things that muggles dream up, eh?" Hagrid, said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. Did you say there are dragons at Gringotts? Well, so they say, said Hagrid, creaking. I'd like a dragon. You'd like one? Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here you go. They had reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand Muggle money as they called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent. Still got your letter, Harry? He asked as he counted snitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. Good, said Hagrid. There's a list there of everything you need. Harry unfolded the second piece of paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. 5-year school will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black. 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. 1 winter cloak, black silver fastening. Please note that all pupil clothes should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the followings. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1. A History of Magical Theory. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. 1000 Magic Herbs. Magical Drafts and Potions. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection. Other equipment. A wand, a cauldron, petrol-cidered size tube, a set of glass or crystal field, a telescope, a set of brass scales. Students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Can we buy all this in London? Harry wondered out loud. You know where to go, said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before. Although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going, he was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the train was too slow. I don't know how the Muggles manage without magic, he said, as they climbed a broken-down escalator which led up to a bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinema, but nowhere that looked as if it could sell you a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street, full of ordinary peoples. How could there really be a piles of wizards' gold buried miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this not all be some huge jokes that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humor, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help trusting him. This is it, said Hagrid, coming to a halt. The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place. It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out loud, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on the other side to a record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had stilled him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to an old barman, who was quite bald and looking like a grummy walnut. The loud buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and then the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Hagrid?" "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clasping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. Can this be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter, what an honor!" He hurried from the behind bars, rushed towards Harry and seized his hand, tear in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Darius Crookfold, Mr. Potter. Can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hands. I'm all of flutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you Diggle's the name. Diddless Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Diddless Diggle top hat fell off in excitement. "You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers!" cried Diddless Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembered me." Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crookford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sorts of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" "Defend it against the dark arts," murmured Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think of it. Not that you need it, eh, Potter? He laughed nervously. You will be getting your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up the new bubblegum vampires myself. He looked terrified at the very thought, but the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from the owl. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the bubble. Must get on, lost turbine. Come on, Harry. Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through a bar and out into a small walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a dustbin and a field with. Hagrid grinned at Harry. Told you, didn't I? Told you you were famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling. Is he always that nervous? Oh yeah, poor block. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out books, but then he took a years to get some first-hand experience. They say he met vampire in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of students, scared of his own subject. Now, where is me umbrella? Vampires? Hags? Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. 3 up, 2 across, he murmured. Right. Stand back, Harry. He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered, it wigged. In the middle, a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were as fencing or archway. Large enough even for Hagrid, an archway onto a cobble street which twisted and turned out of sight. Welcome, said Hagrid, to Diagon Alley. He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into solid wall. The sun shone brightly on the stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all size, copper, brass, pure silver, self-serving, collapsible, and a sign hanging over them. Yeah, you will be needing one, said Hagrid, but we gotta get you money first. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an archway was shrinking at her head as they passed, saying, Dragon liver, 16 sickle on ounce. They're mad. A loaf of pudding came from a dark shop with a sign saying, Europe Owl Emporium. Several boys of about Harry's age had their nose pressed against the window with broomsticks in it. Look, Harry held another one of them. Say, the new Nimbus 2000 fastest ever. There were shops selling gloves, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat springs and ales eyes, torturing piles of spell books, queers, and lured of parchment, potion books, globes of moon. Gringotts, said Hagrid. They had reached the snowy white building which towered over the other little shops. Standing beside it is brushed bronze doors. Wearing a uniform as scarlet and gold was... Yeah, that's a goblin, said Hagrid quietly as they walked up the white stone steps toward him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a shouty, clever face, a pointed beard, and Harry noticed a very long finger and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were fancy a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits, the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most daily in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure dear. Like I said, you'd be mad to try to lure it, said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver door, and they were in a best marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on a high stool behind a long corridor, scrambling in a large ledger, weighing coins and brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Good morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe." "You have his key, sir?" "Got it somewhere here," said Hagrid, and he searched, emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of mouldy dog biscuits over the goblin books of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin off their right, weighing a pile of louis as big as glowing coals. "Got it," said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seemed to be in order." "And I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid importantly, drawing it out of his chest. "It's about the you-know-what in about 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "I will have someone take you down to both boats." Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had climbed out of Dog Biscuit's bag inside the pocket, he and Harry followed the green hoop towards one of the doors leading off the wall. "What's the you-know-what in boat 713? Harry asked. "Can't tell you that," said Hagrid mysteriously. "Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore trusted me. More in jars worth to tell you that." Grimhood held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marbles, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passage with lit flaming torches. It sloped steadily downwards, and there was a little railway track on the floor. Grimhook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up to the track towards them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and were off. First, they just hustled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember left, right, left, middle, fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way because Grimhoop wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung and the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of the passage and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge securities and stalemages grew from the ceiling and floor. "I never know," Harry called to Hagrid over the noise of the cart. "What's the difference between a stalemate and a stairstick?" "Stalemate's got an M in it," said Hagrid. "And don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm gonna be sick." He did look very green, and when the cart stopped at last behind a small door in the passage wall, Hagrid got out and had to lean against the walls to stop his knees trembling. Grimhoop unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little brown nuts. "All yours," smiled Hagrid. "Oh, Harry, it was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they have had it from him faster than blinking." How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep, and all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him, buried under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some off into a bag. "The gold ones are galleons," he explained. 17 silver nickels to a galleon and 29 knots to a silver sickle. It's easy enough, right? That should be enough for a couple of terms. We will keep the rest safe for you." He turned to Grimhop. "Boat 713 now, please. And can we go more slowly?" "We can't. Only one speed," said Grimhop. They were going even deeper now and gentering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hustled round tight corners. They went to rattle over an underground ravine, and Harry leaned over the sides and tried to see what was down on the dark bottoms. But Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruffy snake. "Boat 713 has no keyhole." "Stand back," said Grimhoop importantly. He stroked the doors gently with one of his long fingers and simply melted away. "If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be stuck through the door and trapped in there," said Grimhoop. "How often do you check it to see if anyone's inside?" Harry asked. "About once every 10 years," said Grimhoop, with a rather nasty look. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault. Harry was sure, and he leaned forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very last. But at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up, tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but he knew better than to ask. "Come on, back in the infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's the best if I kept my mouth shut," said Hagrid. One right cart ride after they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had full of money back. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were so proud to know that he was holding more money than he had in his whole life, more money than even Dudley had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding towards Madame Meekins' clothes for all occasion. "Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slid off for a pick-me-up in the leaky cauldron? I hate that Gringotts cart." He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Markin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Marquise was a squat, smiling witch dressed in all mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said when Harry started to speak. Got the lad here, young man, being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed hair was standing on a footstool while the second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Marquise stood Harry on a stool next to him, slipped a long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father next door, buying my books, and mother's up the street looking at ones," said the boy. He had a bored, rumbling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to sea at the racing brooms. I don't see why first grades can't have their own. I think I will bully my father into getting me one and I will smuggling it in tomorrow. Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. Have you got your own broom? The boy went on. No, said Harry. Play Quidditch though? No, Harry said again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house. And I must say I agree. Know what house you will be in yet? No, said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. Well, no one really knows until they got there, do they? But I know I will be in Slytherin. All our families have been imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd be a leaf, wouldn't you? Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. I say, look at that man, said the boy suddenly, nodding towards the front window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing at two large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. That's Hagrid, said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. He works at Hogwarts. Ah, said the boy, I heard of him. He's sort of servant, isn't he? He's a gamekeeper, said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. Yes, actually I heard he's sort of savage, leaving a haunt in the school ground, and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and in the end setting fire to his bed. I think he's brilliant, said Harry coldly. Do you? Said the boy, with a slight sneer. Why is he with you? Where are your parents? They're dead, said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with this boy. Oh, sorry, said the other, not sounding sorry at all. But they were our kind, weren't they? They were witch and wizards, if they what you mean. I really don't think they should let the other sorts in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our race. Some of them had never ever heard of Hogwarts until they got this letter. Imagine. I think they should be kept in old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway? But before Harry could answer, Madame Merkin said, That's well done, my dear, said Harry. And Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to a boy, hopped down from the footstool. Well, I will see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet, and he ate the ice cream Hagrid had brought him, chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. What's up? Said Hagrid. Nothing, Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a big bottle of ink that changed color as he wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, Hagrid, what's Quidditch? Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know, not knowing about Quidditch. Don't make me feel worse, said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy in Madame Merkin's. And he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in. You're not from a Muggle family. If he'd known who you are, he's growing up knowing your name if his parents are wizarding folks. You saw him in the Leaky Cauldron. Anyway, what's those he knows about it? Some of the best I ever saw were your only ones with magic in a long line of muggles. Look at your mom. Look what she had for sister. So, what is Quidditch? It's our sports, wizard sports. It's like football in the Muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch, playing up it the air on broomsticks, and there's florballs. Sort of hard to explain the rules. Are they Slytherin and Hufflepuff? Schoolhouse. Therefore, everyone said Hufflepuff are a lot of dovers, but I bet I'm in Hufflepuff, said Harry gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one. "But, sorry, you know who was at Hogwarts?" "Years and years ago," said Hagrid. "They brought Harry's school books in a shop called Flourish and brought where the shelves and stacks of ceilings with books as large as pavement stones, bound in leather. Book the size of a postage, stamps in covered of silk, books from all peculiar the symbols, and a few books with nothing in them all. If even Dudley, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these." Hagrid almost had to drag Harry away from curse and counter-curse. "Beyond your friend, bewitch your friend, and befuddle your enemies with the last revenge. Hair loose, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more. By Professor Bindicus." "I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but you're not to use magic in the Muggle world except in very important circumstances," said Hagrid. "And anyway, you couldn't work any of them curses yet. You'll need a lot of more studies before you get that level." Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. "It says future on your list." But they got a nice set of scales for weighing potions, ingredients, and collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecaries, which was fascinating enough to make up for its horrible smell. A mixture of bad eggs and rotten cabbages. Barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor, jars of half-dried roots and bright powders lined the wall. Bundling of feathers, staring of wings, fangs, and staring claws hung from the ceiling, while Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of something basic potion ingredient for Harry. Harry himself examined silver unicorn horns at 21 galleon each and minuscule glittery black beetle eyes, 5 clots a scoop. Outside the auto carries, Hagrid checked Harry's list again. "Just your ones left. Oh yeah, and I still haven't got you a birthday present." Harry felt himself go red. "You didn't have to. I know I don't have to tell you what I will get you an animal. Not a toad. Toads are out of fashion years ago. You'd be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They made me sneeze. I will get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're that useful. Carry your post and everything." 20 minutes later, they left Earloop Owl Imperlium, which had been dark and full of rusting and flickering jewel-white eyes. Harry now carried a large cage which held a beautiful snowy owl, fast asleep with her head under her wings. He couldn't stop stammering his thanks, sound just like Professor Quirrell. "Don't mention it," said Hagrid gruffly. "Don't expect you'd had lot of presents from Dudley's. Just Oliver's left now. Only place for one's Oliver's. And you got to have the best wand." A magic wand. This was what Harry had been really looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby, peeling gold letters over the door read "Oliver's, makers of fine ones since 382 BC. Over the door read "Oliver's maker." Single wand lay on a faded purple cushion in the dusty window. A tinkling bell rang everywhere in the depths of the shop as they stepped inside. It was a tiny place, empty except for a single spiny chair which Hagrid sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as though he had entered a very strict library. He swallowed a lot of new questions which had just occurred to him and looked interestedly at the thousands of narrow boxes piled neatly right up to the ceiling. For some reason, the gap at the back of his neck prickled. The very dust of silence in here seemed to tingle with some secret magic. "Good afternoon," said a soft voice. Harry jumped. Hagrid must have jumped too, because there was a loud crunching noise as he got quickly out of the spindling chair. An old man was standing before them, his wide pale eyes shining like a moon through the gloom of the shop. "Hello," said Harry unwittingly. "Ah, yes," said the man. "Ah, yes, I thought I'd see you soon, Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes. It seemed only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10 1/4 inches long. Surely make a willow nice one for charm work." Mr. Oliver moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he would blank. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand, 11 inches feeble, a little more powder, and excellent for transfiguration. "Well, I say your father favored it. It's really the one that chose the wizard, of course." Mr. Oliver had come to close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in these misty eyes. "And that's where—" Mr. Oliver touched the lightning scars on Harry's forehead with long white fingers. "I'm so sorry to say I saw the wand that did this," he said softly. 13 1/2 inches. You powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. Well, if I'd known that what that wand was going into the world to do." He shook his head and then, to Harry's relief, spotted Hagrid. Lucius Hagrid, how nice to see you again. Oh, 16 inches, rather bandy, isn't it?" "It was, sir, yes," said Hagrid. "Good one, that one. But I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled," said Mr. Oliver, suddenly stern. Yes, they did, yes," said Hagrid, stomping his feet. "I've still got their pieces, though," he added brightly. "But you don't use them?" said Mr. Oliver sharply. "Oh, no, sir," said Hagrid quickly. Harry noticed he gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Oliver, giving Hagrid a pitying look. "Well, now, Mr. Potter, let me see." He pulled a long tape measure with silver making out of his pocket. "Which is your wonder?" "Well, I'm right-handed," said Harry. "Hold out your arm, that's it." He mentioned Harry from shoulder to finger, to waist to elbow, shuddering to floor and knees to armpit round his head. As he measured, he said, "Every Oliver wand has a coil of a powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tails, feathers, and the strings of dragon. No two Oliver wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenix are quite the same. And of course, you will never get such good result with another wizard's wand." Harry suddenly realized that the tape measure, which was measuring between his nostrils, was doing this on its own. Mr. Oliver was fluttering around the shelves, taking down boxes. "That will do," he said, and the tape measure crumbled into a heap on the floor. "Right then, Mr. Potter, try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring, nice 9-inch, nice and fixable. Just take it and give it a wave." Harry took the wand and, feeling foolish, waved it around a bit. But Mr. Oliver snatched it out of his hand almost at once. "Maple and Phoenix feather," 7 inches, quite whippy. Harry tried, but he had hardly raised his wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Oliver. No, no, here, Albany and Unicorn here. 8.5 inches, springily. Go on, try it out. Harry tried and tried. He had no idea what Mr. Oliver was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on the spindling chair, but the more wands Mr. Oliver pulled out of shelves, the happier he seemed to become. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry. We will find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder now. Yes, why not? Usual convenient. Hurley and Phoenix feather 11 inches 9s super. Harry took the wand. He felt sudden warmth in his finger. He raised the wand above his head, brought his swish down the dusty air, and a shimmer of red and gold sparks shoot from the end of the firework, throwing dancing spots of light on the walls. Hagrid whooped and clapped. And Mr. Oliver cried, "Oh, bravo, yes indeed, oh, very good, well, how curious, how very curious." He put Harry's wand back into its box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, "Curious, curious." "Sorry," said Harry, "but what's curious?" Mr. Oliver fixed Harry with his pale stare. "I remember every wand I'd have ever sold, Mr. Potter, every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix wall's tail feather is in your hand. Gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. "Yes, 13.5 inches. You. Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand chose the wizards, remember? I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great." Harry shivered. He wasn't sure he liked Mr. Oliver too much. He paid 7 gold galleons for his wand, and Mr. Oliver bowed them from his shop. The later afternoon sun hung low in the sky, and Hagrid made their way back down Diagon Alley, back through the wall, back through the leaky cauldron, now empty. Harry didn't speak at all as they walked down the road. He didn't even notice how much people are galloping at them on the underground, landing as they were, which was funny-shaped package, with the sleeping snowy owls on Harry's lap. Oh, another scarecrow out into a pending station. Harry only raised where they were when Hagrid tapped him on the shoulder. "Got time for a bite to eat before your train leaves," he said. He brought Harry a hamburger and they sat down on the plastic sets to eat them. Harry kept looking around. Everything looked so strange somehow. "You're right, Harry. You very quiet," said Hagrid. Harry wasn't sure he could explain. He just had the best birthday of his life, and yet he chewed his hamburger, trying to find out the words. "Everyone thinks I'm special," he said at last. "All those people in the leaky cauldron, Professor Quirrell, Mr. Oliver, but I don't know anything about magic at all. How can they expect great things? I'm famous and I can't even remember what I'm famous for. I don't know what happened to the night my parents died." Hagrid leaned across the table. Behind the wild beast and eyebrows, he wore a very kind smile. "Don't worry, Harry. You will learn fast enough. Everyone starts at the beginning at Hogwarts. You will just be fine. Just be yourself. I know it's hard. You've been singled out. And always hurt. But you'll be a great time at Hogwarts. I did, still do, matter of fact." Hagrid helped Harry on the train, and that would take him back to Dursley's. then held him to an envelope. "Your ticket for Hogwarts," he said. "First of September, King's Cross. It's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your owl. She will know where to find me. See you soon, Harry." The train pulled out of the station. Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window, but he blinked as Hagrid had gone.